Hello and welcome to AviaDev Insight Africa, the podcast offering a window to the world of African aviation with your host, John Howell, CEO and founder of AviaDev Africa. Today, I am delighted to be welcoming back a familiar voice and face back to the podcast, Kwame Bekoe. For those of you who don't know, Kwame is somewhat of a trailblazer both in aviation and business. He started out as an intern with Airbus, working his way all the way up to regional sales director before moving to the world of aircraft leasing and then heading off to secure an MBA from the Columbia and London business schools. He then returned to the industry leading the commercial department of Zero, where he spoke and attended last year's AviaDev conference in Namibia, talking about their transformational fuel solution and his passion for alternative fuels. And he now embarks on a new chapter founding AfriSAF, which we're going to find out all about today. What you will also hear today is that alongside his professional career, which has been incredibly busy and varied, Kwame's also enjoyed a life as an entrepreneur, and he is an entrepreneur at heart, and that's very much how he thinks and why we've been great friends for many years now. And he's been successfully transforming and applying himself to the agricultural industry in Ghana and beyond that as well, which provided the perfect intersection for this new venture of entrepreneurialism, obviously the opportunity for sustainable aviation fuels. So hopefully that was an okay intro, Kwame. I didn't run that one by you before, but yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Amazing. Well, I'm super excited because I got to sit down with you 2 or 3 weeks ago in London, and you showed me before the actual launch, went through the deck of what AfriSAF is all about, and it was just so exciting. But for those who haven't been able to see it yet, and there'll be links in the show notes, you can go to the website, check out all of the collateral through Kwame's LinkedIn profile, etc. Talk to us about AfriSAF. What's the problem you've identified? What's the opportunity and what's the big idea?
Yeah, well, thanks again, John. It's a pleasure to be here and to be talking about this topic, which obviously over the years has become a very major topic, particularly in aviation. And I think it's something that I personally have come to realize that Africa really sits at the prefaces of unlocking a unique opportunity in the space of sustainability and energy, of course, as it relates to aviation. Africa produces a lot of waste today, and unfortunately, a lot of this waste isn't used or isn't disposed of in an orderly manner, particularly where you get agricultural residues, which is simply burnt off or just discarded, left to release harmful greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So essentially what we're trying to do is to tap into that opportunity and use that resource to basically create sustainable aviation fuel and other types of fuels to meet the needs of energy transition. That's simply what we're trying.
Yeah, so the really interesting thing you talked about there, which fascinated me, is that a lot of people think that for SAF and for using biomass, you would grow the crops in a field, and then people would obviously say that field should be used for growing crops to feed my family, feed my community. Actually, what you're talking about is wastage from agricultural. So it's a byproduct that currently is being burned or disposed of. And what you're looking to do is actually almost purchase this from those farmers and then use that as your source for the fuel. Is that?
That's accurate. And there are a number of different pathways to actually produce SAF, and not all SAF is the same in terms of its carbon intensity as well. So you can go the route of growing energy crops, and that is something that we're looking at, particularly when it comes to deserted land and land which can't be used for agriculture. So you don't get that food versus fuel argument. You're growing on land which isn't being used for agriculture. But then when you look at generation 2 type of waste from agriculture, there's a huge opportunity because we're talking about almost 150 million tons of waste produced on an annual basis, which isn't being used. So you can essentially use all this using a process which could be a gasification process or alcohol to jet to convert it into SAF. So that's the opportunity that we're tapping into.
Yeah, and I think, I really wanted to ask you about this as well, about your experience. And I alluded to it in the introduction, but, you've been involved in the agricultural industry in Ghana. I think it'd be really interesting for our audience who don't know that. They know the aviation, Kwame, just to understand what you've done there and, how that's kind of given you this crystallization of this idea and how you sort of came about it. So can you give the audience a little bit of background into that? I know we didn't prepare for this, but I think it's really fascinating.
Absolutely. So I've always had this love and passion for agriculture as well as aviation as well. And It's funny because when I go to Ghana, a lot of people know me as the agricultural guy, but elsewhere I'm like the aviation guy. And agriculture's been in my family for a long time. I mean, it's something my grandfather used to do, and my dad grew up in that space. And, having land, a huge amount of land. One of the things I observed when it came to agriculture in Africa is a lot of farming is done at a subsistence level. So basically to provide the food needed for their own families or, a small community. And it's not really done at a commercial level, unfortunately. So you get many of people who are in that bracket who are really just living on a day-to-day basis and not really extracting the maximum value you can get from agriculture. So actually, I started a company about 7 years ago called Grow For Me with 3 other friends. And it's actually unique how we actually started the company, because we had a bicycle ride from Accra, Ghana to
I
Lagos in
remember that.
Nigeria
Bamboo
from
bike.
on bamboo bikes, or maybe Ghana bamboo bikes. And it was a great experience, obviously very challenging on the roads, quote unquote, which you can
Survive.
imagine.
That's the main thing.
We survived. We, obviously had the challenges. There was the bureaucracy, particularly at the borders. So really just experiencing what people go through in the rural sectors when it comes to Africa. I mean, many of us know how the cities are in Africa, but once you step out and venture into the rural sectors, it's a completely different world. And what really opened our eyes was the opportunity when it came to the amount of land in Africa, in the continent, the amount of resource, and the amount of people. Africa is about 30 million square kilometers. It's the second largest landmass in the world. When it comes to the uncultivated arable land in Africa, it makes up about 60% of that which is in the world. So there's a huge amount of land that is fertile, that is ready to be used, which isn't being used today for anything at all. And then you've got a huge amount of people, you've got 1.4 billion people, a large percentage of whom are actually working in agriculture, but very subsistence, so not really mechanized. We basically saw an opportunity to bring these two together. So if we're able to bring funding to the rural areas and empower these farmers to do more, to basically farm with better seeds, better resources, better processes, and to some extent mechanized farming, we believe that they can actually do a lot more. And with our platform, which is a crowdfunding platform, we basically encourage people to invest in these farmers and basically take a cut of the return. So we've grown that over the years quite organically. It's very successful at the moment. It became the first crowd farming platform to gain SEC approval in Ghana. We were one of the top Google businesses in Africa, and a lot of recognition from there. And I mean, today it's turning over almost $1 million a year. Obviously, similar to the airline industry, margins are very thin, obviously, as you can imagine. But I mean, it's really touching the lives of many smallholder farmers. Now, with AfriSAF, what I'm looking to do is to add more value by bringing value to their waste, to the feedstock, which today, a lot of it is just burnt off, as I mentioned, or discarded. But that can actually be part of a new value chain in creating sustainable fuels. So that's the vision.
So obviously with your network and the success of Grow For Me, and obviously, you say $1 million, but it's about volume, at the end of the day, and that is going to continue to grow. And even if on a small margin, as we know with airlines, it's about get the volume up and the margin will look after itself kind of thing, So I think that from that side, does that mean that Ghana's kind of a really right place because of your contacts and your experience and the people you've got a farmer network that can provide the feedstock, and then everything else needs to fit into place? Is that one of the places you're sort of focused on?
Absolutely. So the go-to market is to start in Ghana. This is where we have a base, over 9,000 smallholder farmers, commercial farmers as well. So we're starting with this group of people. We are perfecting the model in terms of the marketplace platform. So giving these farmers the ability to upload the different types of residue they're producing, and then inviting project developers and project owners, giving them the ability to see what's available, and we facilitate the aggregation and the logistics of these goods to enable the fact that we can bring all these goods to a unique position and location whereby it can be leveraged in the case of fuel or other purposes.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, that is fantastic. And I think it makes a lot of sense. Often with these big picture things, people start and they try and have this huge global vision straight away. And it's then like, well, where do we start? Whereas I think to look at where is the opportunity, where there's already some sort of structure there, where you know the people, you know the way it works, it makes perfect sense. Now I have to ask this question because I'm fascinated as well. You've spent the last couple of years working with Zero, which for those who are aware, and those who are not aware, that is really using hydrolysis. It's an e-fuel, so it's a sustainable fuel, but it's not produced through biomass and growing things and using agricultural produce. And you've dedicated the last couple of years to that and getting a holistic view of the whole kind of value chain ecosystem. But now, obviously, with AfriSAF, you're very much focused on the biomass. So it is a very different type of raw material that you're going to be using to create this. So explain to me, having spent that time that side, why with AfriSAF is it focused on the biomass side?
It's a great question. So, I mean, for me, Zero was a great platform to learn a lot about sustainable fuels, SAF, and the different pathways leading to producing SAF in the future. Now, e-fuels is really just the end game. It's really the product that is going to offer unlimited scale. It's going to come down with time. Technology is going to improve. The only challenge with e-fuels is it's not there yet. Some pathways are not certified at the moment, and there are no mandates at the moment. So for me, the question was, what is needed for today? I mean, I got into this new year, January 2025. The mandates have kicked in both in the EU and in the UK. And the only type of SAF that is being used is AfriSAF. So basically SAF from used cooking oil. And so that's probably the most mature pathway at the moment, probably the cheapest as well. The cost is very important. Unfortunately, e-fuels are in a place whereby the cost is very high, probably one of the most expensive pathways to produce SAF. So it will take some time, give it 10, 15 years. So I think in the interim, what we're trying to do is to target what is available today. So the feedstock that's available today, the technology that's available today, and the know-how really that's available today. And that really is in the biospace, essentially. And also, obviously, plant economics, it's important to de-risk. Particularly, we're talking about, Africa, where there's a high perception of risk. We need to go for the most mature technology to really de-risk operations as much as possible, and really just try and get to the lowest unit cost possible. So that really is the focus. E-fuels will definitely come later, and there are great opportunities in Africa to develop e-fuels.
Yeah, it's about, I guess, the way I'd look at that is, which I think, again, you've always been, is very pragmatic. It's like, I know the life cycle of these things. I know how far away this thing is. Not that it doesn't work, but the cost is prohibitive and the scale needs to be built. And it's that whole chicken and egg of what comes first. So just to go back to the Ghana example, you've got these thousands of farmers that have got the feedstock for the SAF. Is the next stage then getting somewhere where this can be brought to be processed? And would that be done in Ghana? Is that stage 2, or before that, do you need to do more things?
So the first step really is demonstrating we have a market-based platform which actually serves that purpose. One of the things we truly believe is once we can demonstrate that there is the feedstock availability, that there's the willingness for farmers to basically offtake and support the aggregation and the logistics of their feedstock, and that we can harbor or generate a significant critical mass of feedstock, that in and of itself will build the business case for projects down the line. The biggest challenge today is that there is no SAF plant in Africa. There's about 35. By 2030, to be on target, we need about 160. Sorry, we need about 300. There's only 160 that are planned today, and only a couple in Africa. And there's a big disservice there. So what we're trying to do is start from the foundation, which is the feedstock. So initially, some of our customers will be people not particularly in sustainable fuels who need that feedstock. It may be people in agriculture who need animal feed. Some of the waste residue can be used as animal feed or animal bedding. There are people in construction who can use this residue. There's people in pharmaceuticals as well. There are people in lots of different industries. So essentially, what we're tackling first is a circularity challenge. What we want to ensure is that anything that is available can be put to a purpose, or the CO2 can be sequestered basically, and then create the opportunity for biofuels and SAF down the line. Because at the moment, unfortunately, there are not many biofuel plants. There are not even many biogas plants at commercial scale. I think in Ghana, there's only about 3 or so. And I think that's where I should introduce my co-founder, actually, my business partner, Plabon, who is basically a really great resource. He's coming from a strong technical and operational background. And in France, he's actually invested in and operated around 100 biogas plants. So he's got that experience having worked with plants and operations and set up in France. And essentially, we're looking to do the same in Africa and across Africa. But the first step starts with the feedstock and the data around the feedstock. And then we're going to build a business case around there.
Yeah, amazing. And it sounds like, that is definitely something that's coming, and that's definitely the right place to start. So let me bring in the question of the airlines and how they fit into the bigger picture. We've got airlines in Africa that now, if they're flying into Europe, there will be SAF mandates. They will have to meet this criteria. There aren't so many African airlines that do have intercontinental operations, but this is going to come in. And your engagements with them, would that be as the end user, or are any of these airlines actually interested in investing in something like what you're creating? Because I've seen this a lot. I see it as a frustration that a lot of OEMs and organizations say, hey, we'll use it, we're compatible. And I go, yeah, but you should be investing in the creation of it. Like, why don't you go even further down rather than just saying, we've done our bit, thanks very much? Actually get involved at the grassroots. Have you engaged the airlines yet, or is it too early because of all these other things that need to be in place?
Yeah, and actually, since the launch of AfriSAF, we've had a significant amount of interest, actually, both from outside Africa and some within, not particularly from the airlines, I must say. And obviously, we understand the nature of airlines and the fact that many of them are almost operating on a day-to-day. But one of the things I try to bring in mind is the fact that this is something that is going to come. It's something that we just can't avoid. It's something we need to prepare for. Obviously, we understand that offsets, of course, here are coming soon. Mandates are in place. So some of the airlines are beginning to, wake up to the fact that this is something we need to start addressing, because it's an elephant in the room. And very soon, if we don't prepare the foundation, it's going to be something that sort of bites us down the line. So we are engaging with airlines to be more on the enabling side. Obviously, not all airlines are actually in the place whereby they can invest in creating that ecosystem. But one of the things we are trying to do is to demonstrate the potential of creating that ecosystem in their own countries. I mean, we've been obviously all across Africa, and in my previous role as Zero Petroleum, I've been all across the world: Australia, Asia, Middle East, America. And in each continent, we identify enormous opportunities to develop SAF. I come back to Africa, and of course, I see these opportunities. I see the geothermal in places like Kenya and Rwanda, the opportunity for solar in the Sahara and in Namibia as well. And when you look at Ethiopia and the dam and the hydro potential, it's enormous. In West Africa, the negative correlation between solar and wind is actually really perfect for the production of energy and fuels down the line. But overall, when you look at the biomass potential, there's a huge opportunity. And that's what I'm trying to bring the awareness to airlines, and the fact that if they create that enabling environment whereby they're creating their own fuel or they have SAF production in their own countries, that's going to be a significant opportunity, and they're going to be a step ahead of many others. So that's the awareness that I'm trying to bring at this stage.
Yeah, they can not only produce their own SAF, they can actually be a producer and an exporter, and they can sell to other African airlines if they've got that first mover advantage.
Absolutely.
I think what you're saying, about the African, we talked about this on stage last year about the opportunity geographically and the amount of open space, solar, wind, etc. But the thing that's quite exciting about this project is the raw material exists. The farmers are producing this stuff, and to build the refinery, the plant that's going to turn this into something is, I would assume, much less than creating a whole hydroelectric dam or a huge infrastructure of wind turbines or even the solar farms, in terms of the initial investment. So is that another attractive element of this?
I mean, that's exactly it. What we're trying to do is to add value, just constantly refine and add value to the products that exist, to the feedstock that is there. And initially that may be crushing the oil, partnering with energy providers, providing them with that oil, which can be converted into SAF. And down the line, I mean, there are some refineries which we're talking to, for example, in Nigeria, who can co-process some of the crude into SAF. And then we're also looking at modular SAF units. So we're looking at potentially pilot projects whereby SAF can be produced at a very modular scale. We're not talking a huge amount, maybe initially about 300 tons a year, but then you just 10x that, then you phase up, then you expand upon that, and then create the opportunity whereby Africa is not just a producer of feedstock, which unfortunately it is in many other sectors, but it's actually adding value to that feedstock. And then I think the end goal would be leveraging the book and claim market-based mechanism, so that you can actually decouple the supply of the product from the actual sustainable criteria of that product. And I think that really is the end goal. And we're in a world now whereby SAF and the feedstock of SAF is very expensive. Used cooking oil is actually more expensive in many cases than Jet A1, which is absolutely crazy. But I see the opportunity whereby in Africa we can generate feedstock which are cheap. Labor in many regards is very cheap. And Africa potentially has the potential to produce SAF, which is amongst the cheapest in the world today. So this is the opportunity that we're really driving at and trying to push forward.
Yeah, but also create that SAF quicker than anybody else because the biomass is there. And that's the other point is, these some of the processes are great, but they're going to take time to scale, to be invested, to develop. Whereas this is something that's right now, there's probably fields of wasted agricultural produce that's being burned, as you say, and that shouldn't be released into the atmosphere. That could be processed and you can add value to it to create something else. So I think that's really good. So my last question for you, because next week I'm interviewing Dirk and Shashank from Simply Flying, who I know you've worked with in the past. You were featured on their newsletters, an aviation veteran, which made us all feel very old, I think, Kwame, last week, which made me laugh. But they've got a second book out, Sustainability in the Air too. And, I've spoken to the guys before about this, but there is winds of change, globally away from, and a bit of fatigue when it comes to sustainability in terms of the environmental side. It's a big picture question. We're sat here in April 2025, but how concerned are you that, with certain leadership in certain parts of the world, the whole environmental targets and the focus on this is going to slip at the expense of, we just want more economic growth at any cost, we don't really care. Do you think this is a passing trend? And again, if Africa can stand up, actually, ultimately, we've talked about this before as well, what you want to create a fuel that is as good, but even cheaper and better for the environment. So people aren't just buying it because it's better for the environment. They're doing it because it makes economic sense too. That's the end goal. But, how do you see the environment, how it's changed the last 6-12 months?
It's a very good question. And obviously political landscape has changed quite drastically. But I think where I stand, I'm looking at the long term. I mean, if I just take a 4-year view, that is in and of itself very short-sighted. I think we are in an energy revolution. I think things are going to change drastically. And from what I've seen and in my experience, the change when it comes to SAF and SAF technology and the maturity of SAF technology and the cost down, which is very important, has been dramatic. I think what we've seen with green hydrogen production, what we've seen even with solar and wind over the past 20, 30 years is remarkable. I mean, today, the cheapest form of electrical generation is basically your solar or wind. But 20 years ago, it was like 10x of fossil-based production. I believe we are going to see the same when it comes to liquid hydrocarbons and sustainable aviation fuel. And we are very much thinking about this from a very commercial angle. And the target is cost parity at all times. The target is always to get to cost parity with fossil-based fuel to basically displace that type of fuel. So while sustainability is a critical element, we need to get to cost parity to reach commercial scale and viability. And that remains the focus, I would say.
Yeah, it's what we've said all along, which is it's about pragmatism now. You know, the reason for doing something because it was a good thing to do isn't as strong as, well, it's also the best thing to do for everything else as well, you know. And one way, it's carrot and stick, isn't it? You know, you can say you've got to hit these targets in terms of your SAF uptake, or we're going to create something that's so compelling that it's better than what's already there and it's cheaper. Well, then you vote with your feet whether you're, you know, whether you like that or not. It's going to make sense, but that takes time. It requires scale. It requires investment. So I think, you know, from my side, this is really interesting to watch how your journey is going to adapt and these airlines going to come on board, because there are some that are particularly vocal about this. So I'm really hoping they engage early and want to be part of this, because ultimately it's connecting the end users with those producing the waste and then everything in the middle of that value chain. So I know you're incredibly busy with putting all that together, and yeah, always inspiring us, Kwame. So thank you for being with us today and sharing the story about AfriSAF, and I'm sure you'll be back on soon.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John.
Awesome. And if anybody wants to find out more, I will put the web address and also a link to Kwame's LinkedIn profile as well, so you can connect and follow him and follow the journey of AfriSAF and get in touch if obviously you are interested in developing and supporting him to develop this, because this isn't just good for the world. It's great for Africa. It's great for aviation. And we need big dreamers and big thinkers to make this happen. So thank you everybody out there for listening. If you did enjoy the episode, if there's somebody in your network you think would benefit from listening, do hit share and share it with them right now. And don't forget to subscribe to never miss another episode. And we'll be back very soon. Take care and goodbye.